Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, it is a mailbag episode, and we are answering your questions. We got questions about the Dodgers and whether they even need a closer, and if so, who should it be? We also have some questions about Gavin Lux and whether he will be the Dodgers shortstop in 2024. And finally, we have questions about how you define a dynasty after you sign Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto for the next decade or so. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. My name is Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is my co-host, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like a lot of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And we put out a call on Friday morning or Thursday morning for questions for our Friday mailbag. We haven't done a lot of these mailbags recently because there's been a lot of news actually happening. But there's a lot of stuff that, and you can tell in the questions that we got, there were a lot of questions about the starting rotation and the outfield. And spoiler alert, we're not going to address really any of those in this episode simply because that's what our last, like most of our last, 10 episodes have been on some degree or another about the starting rotation and the outfield. And so there's plenty of Locked On Dodgers content about that. And I promise you we'll talk more about it. But for this particular mailbag, we had a few questions that address some things that are exciting topics, interesting topics, and stuff we haven't talked about recently. And so we're going to focus on those. First of all, hey, Vince, how you doing?
I'm good. We are through the first week of January, so we're moving forward.
Yeah, we should mention on Thursday there was a report that the Dodgers are all in on Roki Sasaki when he does get posted, that they've been scouting him since he was in high school, a bunch of other stuff. We're not really going to dig into that today because we just talked about Sasaki 2 days ago. And so, but I'm sure we will talk more about that report next week, probably as we hear more about that. Sasaki is going to be a big topic of interest for the next year or so, assuming he's posted next offseason. So plenty to talk about there, but not on this episode. We got some really good questions this time, and we always do. We really appreciate that. Hope you guys know how much we appreciate it. But we wanted to dig into a few, and starting with the closer position. And we had a couple interesting questions. One from our buddy Brian Knudsen. Does he pronounce like I don't even know? At Knudervalve on Twitter. Brian's a good dude. He says, why do people feel like we need a closer? Has Evan Phillips not done enough? And then in conjunction with that, we had a question from Anthony at Simbronis on Twitter. Said, including the cost, in the parentheses, dollars or prospects, what's your preference on getting one of Josh Hader, Emmanuel Clase, or Kenley Jansen? And so thought we'd talk about closer for this segment. I guess first let's address Brian's question about why do people think the closer, Evan Phillips, is awesome? And for me, the more I think about it, and thinking about specific pitchers, which we'll get to in a second, but you guys know, if you're everydayers, you know that I kind of, my platonic ideal of a bullpen, there is no set closer. You have 6 or 7 lights out relievers and you deploy them situationally. And so if Evan Phillips is your best reliever, I don't want him tied to the 9th inning, because the 9th inning isn't always the hardest inning. If you have the 2, 3, 4 hitters coming up in the 8th inning, I want Evan Phillips in, or I want your best reliever in the game in the 8th inning. And the Dodgers kind of did that last year. As the season went on, I think Phillips did become more a traditional closer, but he was still deployed in kind of a fireman situation. But the more I've thought about it, like, I don't hate the idea of having a closer who is the closer and having Evan Phillips, because basically having a closer then frees them up to let Evan Phillips be that guy who is deployed situationally. It's easier to say, Evan Phillips, you're pitching this thing if you know who's pitching the ninth inning. Because if you've got 2, 3, 4 coming up in the sixth inning, they're going to come up again, probably, hopefully in the ninth inning, if the seventh and eighth inning guys do their jobs. And so, sixth, seventh, eighth inning, I want Evan Phillips free to face the hardest part of the lineup in one of those 3 innings. And so I don't hate the idea if you do have an elite closer who only wants to pitch the ninth inning and Evan Phillips. Does that make sense, Vince?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the argument we kept having to make the Craig Kimbrell year and even Jansen in his last couple of years, where they weren't lights out closers at that point, but they weren't good enough to pitch in like tougher situations. Like the ninth inning, for the most part, you're going to come in and have, nobody on base, and whoever you're facing in the order, there's nobody on base. You're going to come in with a clean inning. It's a lot easier than coming in with like bases loaded, nobody out, something like that. So it makes sense. Obviously, in those 2 years with Jansen and Kimbrell, they weren't quite lights out, and they did blow some saves, and it was a little bit frustrating. So if you got and get somebody that is more dominant in that role, then that's the ideal situation of, okay, this guy, and that's why, for me, I think moving on to the other question is why Hader makes the most sense in a few reasons. But one of the reasons being it's only going to cost money. It's not going to cost you prospects. And Jansen, I don't really want to bring back Jansen. That time has happened, and I don't think it's one of those where if Hader lost the closer role, in theory he'd still be good enough to be a reliever on the Dodgers. Where if Jansen is not the closer, I don't know if he's a good enough reliever to be in the mix. And Clase would cost more prospect wise, which I'm not too keen on trading prospects for a closer, especially one who's had kind of an erratic last couple of years in terms of last year wasn't as good as the year before. But regardless, Hader makes sense because he is a ninth inning guy. Like, he doesn't, in the past, he hasn't shown willingness to do much more than pitch when it's a safe situation. And obviously, I think that was him saving himself a little bit in order to get to free agency, in order to cash out. But also, I think that he's comfortable there. And if he's comfortable there and the Dodgers can use all these other arms in the rest of the game, I think you make it a little bit easier for, not that Dave Roberts did bad last year with the bullpen, especially early on when they didn't have a bona fide closer, but this just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it won't surprise our everydayers to learn that I agree with pretty much every word you just said, Vince. It's between those 3, I am all aboard the Hader train for the same reasons you said. It's just money, trading prospects for a closer. And I think if I was more excited about Shane Bieber, I might be more on board with, a Bieber and Clase trade. I think Bieber would be fine, but Bieber isn't Corbin Burns at this point, and so, if the Dodgers could swing Corbin Burns and Devin Williams, that's the answer. Give up as many prospects as they want for those 2 guys. But, among these 3, Hader's just money. I do wonder, what, like you said, about how much of Hader's reluctance to pitch anything other than the ninth inning was, and reluctance to pitch more than an inning, more than 3 outs, had to do with the fact that he was about to become a free agent, and, to become a free agent really for the first time. So, I mean, Hader, for as dominant as he's been, he's made $37 million in his career, which, it's a lot of money. I acknowledge that's a lot of money for an elite Major League Baseball player. It's not a lot of money. If you made a list of guys who've made more than $37 million in their career, there would be a whole lot of guys a lot worse than Josh Hader on that list. So this is his chance to cash in. So I don't blame the guy. And the Padres sucked last year. It's like they weren't fighting for a playoff spot. There was no reason for him to, sure, I'll get 6 outs for you, Bob Melvin, so that we can win, 81 games instead of 80 games. Like I get why he may have been a hardliner there, which is all to say he might be open to a different role. Maybe he is used to just 3 outs, but maybe if they had a 2-headed monster and it was like, okay, Evan Phillips and Josh Hader, you guys are pitching the 8th and 9th innings every game that you're both available. But If we've got lefties in the 8th inning and righties in the 9th inning, let's go with Hader in the 8th and Phillips 9th. He might be open to that. But even if not, both guys are so good that, Hader is going to get guys out, and part of the reason I think he might be open to it is sometimes you got a guy who's gunning for a Hall of Fame plaque. Craig Kimbrell had to be the closer because he wants to be a Hall of Famer, and that depends on save numbers. Josh Hader has 165 saves in his career, and he's 30 years old. He's probably not getting enough saves to make the Hall of Fame anyway. And so he might just, put that aside and, okay, you got your payday. Now let's do what's best for the team. I think he might be open to that. So I'm aboard the Hader train.
Yeah. And of note, John Heyman did report that the Dodgers are still in on Hader. So I don't think he's a Boris client. So that means that it's not just Boris telling him that.
Not just whispering what Scott Boras whispered in his ear last night. We're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about Gavin Lux and the shortstop position. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. Look, do you ever buy tickets? Of course you do. You go to Dodger games, probably go to concerts, you go to comedy shows, and buying on the secondary market is super annoying. It can be it's so hard to find a good deal, to know where your seats are. Very stressful. Well, GameTime is here to take the stress out of buying tickets, make it a totally relaxed and happy experience. I've mentioned this before. I bought tickets to see Nate Bargatze, my favorite comedian, here in Salt Lake last fall. And it was so easy. I got the best deal. I compared all the other sites and I got the best price. And that's because GameTime guarantees you're going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. You're not going to, though, because the reason they make that guarantee is because they make sure they give you the best price. And it's really easy to do it. You get pictures of your seats, always going to get good tickets, great price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, we're back. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodger your first listen, especially our everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, you can become one by watching and listening every weekday morning. Remember, you can check out the 24/7 streaming channels that the Locked On Podcast Network has on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles. I'll let you figure out what those are focused on. One is national sports. One is just Los Angeles sports. Both are great 24/7 streaming channels from our network. You can also become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. It's a great way to support us with a few bucks a month and get text messages from us and interact with us via text. You can reply to us. We'll reply to you. It's a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun over there with a few dozen of you who are there right now, and it's only growing. Become a Locked On Dodgers insider. And with that said, let's jump back into our questions. We had a couple of questions about Gavin Lux and kind of different questions. We had where I can't find the question about the possibility of Gavin Lux being traded. Do you see that one?
Yeah, Sam at Sam_Shear99.
Oh, there it is.
Do you see Lux getting moved potentially in a trade?
Yeah, and then we had another question that was just Tim Anderson ? Lux getting moved in a trade. I feel like it would have to be a trade that involves a shortstop who's better than Tim Anderson coming back to the Dodgers. And honestly, I have a hard time seeing it. What's that? I know, right. But I'm saying Tim Anderson would not be the replacement for Gavin Lux. They'd have to be getting back a good shortstop in a trade. And the only one that even makes a little sense probably is Corbin Burns and Willy Adames packaged together. I love the idea of Corbin Burns on the team. Trading Gavin Lux for Willy Adames, just as far as the shortstop position goes, I'm still pretty high on Gavin Lux. I've always been high on Gavin Lux. I think he's going to be an excellent major league hitter. I do have concerns about his defense, especially coming off the knee injury. But I do think, I wouldn't say I'm confident that he's going to be a solid defensive shortstop, but I am optimistic that he can be at least roughly league average at shortstop because he's an excellent athlete and all of that. So all those reasons, I am totally in favor of giving Gavin Lux a shot at shortstop like they planned on doing in 2023. And I think that's what they're going to do. I have a hard time seeing him being traded.
Yeah, I don't see him being traded, but I do think wouldn't consider him like untouchable in a sense. Uh, but it's one of those where you'd have to be getting either, like a pitcher and a shortstop, or a pitcher and a, very good outfielder. And then, because if you get, I mean, it would kind of suck, but if you got like a really good outfielder and you got by with Rojas and Taylor and whoever at shortstop, it wouldn't be ideal. You wouldn't want that. But, let's just say you got, I don't know, a Rosarena doesn't make sense as much because there's not another starter to come with him. But if that was, if there was like a Rosarena type and a Corbin Burns type, that would be the only way I see it. And yeah, I think it's one of those where they're they've said it, and they're gonna take the chance on Lux. And I do think at the very least, if he can be a good hitter, the defense can work itself out, or at least compromise a little bit, not too much. And realistically, I think the only issue was the throwing that we've seen. I don't think it was a matter of range or anything like that. Obviously, with the knee injury coming off that, we saw Ronald Acuna. Maybe he tried to come back too fast or something. He didn't have his full mobility and his full acceleration and everything that first year back. And then you saw this year, he obviously took off and won MVP. So I do think that that would be more concerning to me than anything else, as if, okay, he does come back, but he doesn't have that full mobility or whatever. Then do you play Mookie at short at that point if it's early in the season and you kind of notice like, hey, look, I don't know if Lux can play this position right now, or do you just move? Obviously it's going to depend on who else to get this offseason, but would you move Mookie back to the outfield, move Lux to second, and play Rojas or Taylor, whoever at short? There's a lot of question marks in that sense, but I think you're not going to be able to have an all-star at every position, and shortstop is a tough one not to have someone that's for sure like all-star quality. Not that Gavin Lux isn't, but he just hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, and I think the offense he's likely to provide is going to be so good for a shortstop that I think we'll be okay with giving up a little bit of defense. The Yankees did it for 20 years with Derek Jeter, and he's in the Hall of Fame now. That's right. I just said Gavin Lux is going to the Hall of Fame. Write it down. Heard it here first. We also have another Lux question from our buddy Kevin at Blue Goon 82. We mentioned the other day the commenter in our YouTube comments who keeps touting the idea of Gavin Lux at leadoff. Kevin says, I, for one, like the idea of Lux at leadoff. Of course you do, Kevin, because I said I don't like it. And that's your thing, Kevin. He says it lengthens the lineup, and if Lux is the 2022 version, then he's just too good to hit last. Doc even mentioned Lux at leadoff last year before he got hurt. I know Jeff isn't a fan, but what's the reason? And I'll give my reason, and then you can say if you agree with it, Vince. For me, the reason you don't bat Gavin Lux leadoff is because he's not your best hitter. He's not one of your three best hitters. You have Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei Ohtani. Those guys have to be the first three hitters in the lineup, or you are giving away plate appearances. Every spot you move down in the lineup, you lose 13 to 15 plate appearances over the course of a year. And so if you put a lesser batter at leadoff and move those guys down, you are giving up, 13 to 15 plate appearances for each of those guys. And that adds up to 45 plate appearances that, Mookie gets 13 to 15 less. Freddie gets 13 to 15 less. Ohtani gets 13 to 15 less. And those are going to Gavin Lux. And in my perfect world, you would line guys up by their on-base percentage, and that would be your lineup. And in that case, Gavin Lux would probably be batting fifth or sixth in this Dodgers lineup based on what I expect him to do offensively. But, once you've ruled out leadoff, ninth makes a lot of sense because, we saw in 2022, 2022, when Lux was really good for the first 5 months of the season, and having him batting ninth and just setting the table for the big three of that year, which was Mookie and Trey and Freddie, setting the table for those guys, it was win-win all around. And yeah, you are giving up, the fact is, batting ninth, you are going to have mathematically 100 or so fewer plate appearances than you would batting leadoff. That's the trade-off you make. And until Gavin Lux has established himself as an elite hitter, I think you take the decreased pressure of batting ninth, a role that he has excelled in, and the fact that he is then setting up for the big guys after the first time through the lineup. And ninth just makes so much sense for me for Lux. Once you've ruled out first, second, or third, and I think you have to rule those out.
Yeah, to me, you're like you said, it's and it kind of compounds because like if you move Otani to fourth, he's getting 15 less than he would have got, but he's also getting more than he would have got if he was at it kind of compounds in itself. And for me, coming off ACL surgery, coming off not seeing live pitching for over a year, I'm not throwing Gavin Lux in the leadoff spot, right off the bat. Now, if he was, and it's one of those where it's kind of a catch-22 because let's just say he does hit very well and he is in the ninth spot and he's hitting 320 and his on-base percentage is almost 400. Well, it's kind of like, is he doing it because he's in the ninth spot and he feels comfortable, or is he doing it because this is how good he is? And then if you move him to leadoff, how long do you leave him there if he struggles before you move him back? And it's one of those things where Mookie likes to bat leadoff, and he batted leadoff over Trey Turner, and he batted leadoff. He's your guy that you have signed for 9 more years. He was your franchise player. You're not going to move him off for Gavin Lux. Now, Mookie obviously will do whatever for the team if they tell him to, but I don't see the reason, especially considering the fact that after the first time through the lineup, Lux might be a de facto leadoff at various points in the game. He's going to get less at-bats, but he's also going to have more chances to be on base for those guys.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, not only does Mookie really like batting and leadoff, he's also really, really good at it. Right. And I guess there's the speed factor that some people bring up because Lux is faster than both Mookie and Freddie, at least. I think speed is overrated at leadoff. As far as stealing bases goes, I think stolen bases can be valuable wherever you are in the lineup. And we're not in the era of 130 stolen bases in a year anyway. If Lux is going to steal, if he was going to steal 35, if he was batting leadoff and he's only going to steal 30 batting ninth, I'm okay with that trade-off to get more at bats for the better hitters. So we're going to come back in a second. We're going to talk about what would constitute a dynasty for these Dodgers after their big spending spree so far this offseason. So please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's right. You don't even have to win the bet. You don't have to be any good at this betting thing. Just place a $5 bet and boom, you're a new customer. You get $150 in bonus bets that then you can use your good bets, the important ones, with the free money. $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app is so easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This episode is also brought to you by Logix. On this show, you get a lot of in-depth analysis, occasionally a hot take. Well, let me give you my hottest take of the day. The best lineup in LA right now is the lineup of auto loans at Logix. They start at the top with my favorites, the proven and dependable new and used vehicle loans. You can count on these guys to give you low rates and save you big-time bucks. Next up, they've got an exciting new rookie sensation in their electric vehicle loans with super low rates and flexible payment terms. Rounding out their lineup, they've got their auto refinancing loans and lease buyout loans. With these guys, you could lower your monthly payments and get on the road to owning your car faster. Look, I know it's a hot take, but seriously, no one can beat the lineup at Logix. Visit your local Logix branch right here in LA and surrounding areas and let one of their amazing team members help you, or just apply online in minutes at logixbanking.com/car. That's LOGIX banking.com/car. Hey, we're back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comment section. If you're listening on the podcast, you can talk to us all the other ways that we'll give you all the contact info at the end. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. It's just a few bucks a month, and there's a free 14-day trial, and you can text with us. It's a lot of fun. Our last topic of the day from questions, it was a really good question that we got asking, how would we define success based on the moves that the Dodgers have done this offseason? I can't find this one either, Vince. Why is it hiding from me?
I don't know. Let me see. How many rings in the next 10 years of the Ohtani era is a success? In my opinion, this is Eric at Eric the Dub 2. It says 5+ is Dynasty, 3 to 4 is success, 2 is okay, 1 or none is awful.
Yeah, and you know what? Yeah, sorry, I just found it right when you finished ringing it. Sorry, Eric. I actually like his definition quite a bit, I think. I wouldn't necessarily say only one World Series title is awful, because I believe that, any World Series title is should be applauded. And with, 12 teams making the playoffs now, that means that in any given year, even if you make the playoffs, you have less than a 10% chance of winning it. And so one World Series title in the next 10 years mathematically would be, and obviously our expectations are higher because they put together a great team. But the willy-nilly nature of the MLB postseason, it's not much more than 10%. So I wouldn't say one is awful. One would be a disappointment, though. 2 is okay. I do agree. 3 or 4 World Series titles in the next 10 years is probably how Andrew Friedman would probably define success of this offseason. I don't think they're crazy enough to think that they're going to win the World Series every year. But I do think that they, with what they're doing and all the different ways that they're great at building a team, I do think they expect to win 3 or 4 World Series titles over the next decade, and that would be success. And anything more than that, yeah, we're just running away with things. And, I'm open for 7. I don't want 10 in the next 10 years. I think we would not appreciate it as much. In fact, I may not even want 7. Let me see. If they win every other, I guess 5 is every other year. But I'll take 1 year that they would have lost, but instead they won. So we got a 3-peat in there. And so that's 6 in the next 10 years with 1 3-peat in there. So every other year except 1 3-peat. That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah, I think anything less than 3 is disappointing as a fan. Obviously, there's a lot of caveats to get into, and injuries and health and all that stuff is going to play a part of it. But I think you kind of look at the last 10 years, and they won 1 and should have won 2. And, now you're kind of building towards that. And now the next, 10 years, you theoretically have better people. Like, because the first few years, like 2013, 14, 15, 16, the Dodgers had good teams. But
they weren't the favorites.
They weren't nowhere near 2017, even 2018, 2019. Like, they weren't winning 100+ games every year at that point, or on pace to win 100+ in the case of 2020. So I think 3 is one of those to kind of the standard that I would hold in the sense of like, all right, cool. Like it was worth it. And, obviously once we get the 1 and the parade, like a full parade and everything, and you might feel differently. You might be like, all right, cool, we got 1, and and then you only need like 1 more. Like next year, I think is the big year, because if you win the next year, now you're opened up to where you only need 1 or 2 the next 9 years to kind of feel comfortable with it. And there's other teams that are gonna be good. There are other teams that are gonna be able to knock you off. But I do think that you have to get at least 3 in the next 10 years, and not to be defined as a success, but just as a fan to feel like, oh yeah, that feels good.
Yeah. And if we look back at the last 10 years, like you said, the Dodgers won it in 2020. They won it in 2017, except the other team cheated. Like, so if the Astros hadn't cheated, spoiler alert, Astros cheated because they're cheating cheaters. If the Dodgers had won it in 2017 and 2020, I'll also go to my grave believing they would have, if they had won it in 2017, they would have won it in 2019 too, because I believe 2019 is the only one that you can definitively say Dave Roberts blew that one. And I don't think Dave Roberts blows that in 2019 if Clayton Kershaw already had a World Series ring. if Astros hadn't cheated, Clayton Kershaw probably wins a World Series MVP in 2017. And in that case, his postseason demons have been exorcised. And so Dave Roberts wouldn't have felt the need to go on a redemption tour with Clayton Kershaw in Game 5 of the 2019 NLDS. And instead he would have used one of his 8 rested relievers to get those last 6 outs, 1 or 2 or 6 of those rested relievers. And the Dodgers win that series and probably win the World Series. And so if the Dodgers had won 3 World Series in the last 10 years, even with the NLDS exits the last 2 seasons, I think we would look back at the last 10 years as successful. And so that's why I said, 3, I think so. And maybe the expectations are a little bit higher because of all this money they spent on Ohtani. But I also think it's like, if you can cluster some of them together, because like if the Dodgers won in 2024 and then in 2033, that's 2 World Series titles, but 8 years of not winning in between. And I think those 8 years would be long for Dodger fans. And so that's why I like the idea of every other year. So, it doesn't get boring, but you are still, there's like that grace period. You win a World Series, fans aren't really allowed to complain too much the next year. And so you don't win it the next year. Okay. And then boom, win another one. And that's how you keep fans happy, is to win regularly. And every once in a while throw in a back-to-back or a three-peat.
Yeah. I think you need at least, I want to be to the point where I don't say, I don't go into October and I'm like, yeah, they're not going to hate. So what's the point, type of deal.
Yeah,
I want them to make me feel comfortable.
That's more a you problem though.
That's not just me. That is not just me.
But the fact is, the Dodgers have won 1 World Series in your lifetime. They've won 3 in my lifetime. I have a lot of gray hair. They've won 2 that I remember. And so I think we should appreciate them as we get them, obviously. And if we only get 1 in the next 10 years, let's enjoy the heck out of that 1, enjoy the parade that we finally get, all of that stuff. And, but yeah, I agree with what you said. Win it in 2024 and then, take it 1 year at a time. And then it's like, okay, we won that one. Well, might as well win it again. And if they do that, I won't get bored with it. If they want to win all the next 10, I'm cool with that too. I think that does it for us today. Like I said, we did get a lot of good questions. There's some that we'll add to the docket to, maybe touch on in episodes next week. Like I said, if they're about starting pitching and outfield, we may not address them directly, your questions, but there's still plenty to talk about with those things because the Dodgers are still in the market for both of those things. So we will continue talking about that. You have anything else for today, Vince?
Nope.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for being an everydayer. If you're not, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 YouTube 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Remember to become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. It's a great way to support us with a few bucks a month. There's a free 14-day trial, and it's a lot of fun texting back and forth with us, I think. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and both of our DMs are open there. You can also email us at lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail or a text message at 323-863-LOCK5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Have a good one.